And welcome to HBYOB BrewCast, where a couple of us get together and talk about brew. Tonight, dry hopping, and I'm really excited. We'll be back in one moment. And this is Easy Kill. And tonight, HBYOB.com, I've got a couple co-hosts with me. First, I have Chris Allen. Chris, how you doing this evening?
Not too bad, Mark. How you doing, man?
I'm doing fine, Just got done talking some fantasy sports. Now we're getting ready to drink some beer. During the fantasy cast, do you drink? I never noticed. We talk so much. I don't even have time. I think last week I brought a beer, didn't even drink it.
I drink water typically during those because I'm trying to remember stats and information or just like general knowledge stuff. So I don't.
Sure.
For this, I mean, a little bit more laid back, and I'm not the expert here, so I don't have to bring as much knowledge.
Right. You're not the expert. All right.
Hell no.
My other co-host, the owner of HBYOB, Joey Brumley. Joey, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing well.
Oh, good. Sound excited there. If you want to see us, go to HBYOB.com. You can get the link. We're live on Facebook. You have a Facebook page, so you're up there. Do you post? No, I'd say that. Do you post the videos on there on your if someone's following HBYOB on Facebook, would they get a link up there to the cast?
That's a pretty good question. I'm not sure.
Okay, well, maybe we need to look into that.
Do I, Chris?
If you go,
not currently.
All right, make that happen. But if you go to HBYOB.com, you can hit on the YouTube because we are on YouTube Live, Spreaker Live, pretty much any of those. If you just search HBYOB, you'll find us. Like I said, tonight, Chris, did you do your 5K? And are you back to being able to drink now?
Yes, did the 5K on Saturday. Both Mary and I, Joey's wife, we ran it. I had actually quite a few beers Saturday night, and I'm back to drinking for at least. I'm gonna go for maybe a few more weeks, but then supposed to be doing another one at the end of July. So I'll let myself, have a. You
did a 5K though. What was your time?
My official time was, I think, 26 minutes and 9 seconds, which was
a steady pace. You were fairly jogging / running. I mean,
yeah, which was a pretty decent improvement over my time from the run that we did a few weeks prior. Right. I'm happy with it.
I mean, I think that's about 10-minute mile roughly. So
8 and some change, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't think so. Because you ran a little over 3 miles. I think it's 3.2, 3.4 miles, something like that's a 5K, and you did it about 25. I'm good. Proud of you. Now, how much better would your time have been, or how much worse would your time have been if you'd have drank a few beers on a couple of our shows?
Would probably have been way worse because it was
worse.
It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It was so hot outside. It was like hot and humid. All that beer would have still been in me somehow, and I would have been super dehydrated.
Now, just so people out there know, this was a beer K, right, or something like that. Wasn't beer involved?
You could do, I guess there was a separate race, like a quarter-mile race, where you could do tastings at a couple of stops along the way. But we just did the 5K where it was the race, and then you could get beer samples afterwards. That's what we did. I wasn't going to try and do that stuff when it was that hot outside.
All right.
No thanks.
All right. Joey, I heard you also participated in this 5K, but you did the part we just discussed, which is the actual beer tasting. You did not participate in the actual running part. Is that true? Did you participate in the tasting there, Mr. Brumley?
I did like a 15S. So I did 15 samples.
15 samples.
But no running.
Hey, all right. Hey, nothing like 15 samples in an Uber ride. That's a good night.
That's all you need sometimes.
Yeah, that's right. Chris, real quick, what are you drinking tonight?
I've got some homebrew that I'm actually retrying. It's been almost a solid month. Well, I mean, obviously it's been over 6 weeks since I've had this stuff, but this is an IPA that I brewed. I want to say like towards the end of April. So I've been, kind of, wanting to figure out how it was going to taste since it's had like, it's been a few months since I've had it.
I'm gonna have to get Joey to give Joey one of my growlers he gave me, and I need to try some of your homebrew. I've had a couple of Joey's. I do need to, get some sampling of what your skills, your mad skills are. Maybe that beer that didn't do so well in the contest that the other day, maybe I'd be a good judge, and I could maybe give you 8 stars or something.
Yeah, as long as you're not a bitter BJCP judge, then you'll probably think my beer is okay.
There you go. Joey, what are you? So this is something you homebrewed. Did you just drink it? Is that the first time you've drank this, or is it something you've already had? I mean, this your first experience with it?
No, I've had it for a little bit. I tried it once I first got it, like put it in the keg, and it was okay. But it's just been a couple months since I've had something.
Joey, what are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking a homebrew. Is actually before the cast started. It's the last pour. I just blew the keg, so
nice.
A homebrew of the Inning IPA did, and then I actually brought, since we're talking dry hopping, the Cache by Warped Wing. It's a New England style IPA, and the show is about dry hopping. And I know the beer I brewed that I'm drinking. It was dry hopped, and I can almost guarantee this Cache was too.
Which I'm pretty excited to get into it because I have no clue what dry hopping means. So, we'll get there in just a second. I bought this for one reason, I guess two. Nitro IPA. Have either one of you had it?
Yep.
Okay. I guess I only bought it because the Guinness at the store didn't have the little Chris, tell me what the little thing's called in there. The widget.
Yeah. I think it's called a widget. I thought that. Yeah, it sounds right.
All right. This is supposed to have one in it. So
it does. That's a true nitrogen.
This is true. All right.
Yep. And I know I know how your reaction is going to be when you drink it.
I know you know me. You know me too well. Is this? Oh, I can smell it.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Probably dry hopped.
All right.
That's what you smell.
Enjoy from a glass. Pop and pour. So
yeah, you want to pour that sucker immediately so you can get a nice cascade effect.
Oh, all right. Oh man, there's nothing but bubbles.
Yeah, It's like a Guinness.
Yeah, all right, so that's a good thing.
Well, what a Guinness is supposed to be like.
Mm-hmm. Oh, what you got a different one, didn't you, Joey? We did it that there.
I got.
All right, I'll let that sit just a second, and I mean it should be good. All right, so. That's what we're drinking. We'll get in a little bit later. I'll ask your opinions on what you're drinking. Joey, that's kind of
got some floaties in there.
Was that the idea?
I guess. I don't know.
How'd you filter that one, or did you just
this is the one I bought from
that's the one you bought though.
Yeah.
Is that new? I've not seen that one, and I go to a place that carries quite a bit of different Warped Wings. Is it newer or just not as popular? Seasonal?
I think it's a newer one for them.
It must be. Yeah, I don't think I recognize that can.
Right.
You guys know I'm a can guy.
Well, all right. This looks good. Did you have something?
I haven't had, or I've had this beer, or I don't remember it though. So,
you've had it based on the name, the taste.
Well, I've had a lot of examples of the style, and so I'm curious to see what I think of it.
I did notice today, and I know you'll make fun because it happens to be my beer. It is Trotwood Warped Wings big seller now because I saw a big billboard for the first time for Trotwood, and they're calling it Ohio's Lager. I know neither one of you like it, but it is Warped Wing trying to get into that Yingling class, or just trying to get the normal person that doesn't really usually drink craft beer to?
I think they got shareholders to please. That is for sure.
All right.
But they're brewing more popular styles of beer. Mm-hmm. And now this is a New England IPA, that's all the craze these days. So
yep.
I've had a lot. I actually think that more of the homebrew examples I had, I actually enjoy more than the big guys. There's some smaller ones out there that are really, really well. There's a brewery, and I can't remember the name of them now. They're a new brewery in Xenia, Ohio, that actually has a really good New England IPA.
Okay, my nitro. So this widget, obviously, since I never had a Guinness with one, I guess. I mean, that is by far the finest foam / head I've had on a beer. Is that the idea?
When you drink it, it's going to taste flat.
Oh, I didn't notice that. I mean, there's a lot of little bubbles in it.
Have you drank it yet?
Yeah.
I thought it tasted flat when I drank it, but that's because of the nitro. Looks cool.
Mm-hmm.
It almost gives it like a creamy, velvety.
Yeah.
Now,
okay. Is there any way to duplicate that as a home brewer?
Yeah. I mean, if you have a nitro system.
So nitro system is what you use.
Yep. A lot of home brewers and breweries that do use nitrogen still actually will carbonate it some with CO2. But then they'll pour it with a nitrogen system. It can be done as a home brewer.
And you can do that with, I mean, obviously it doesn't have to be an IPA. Guinness is just a stout.
Yeah. Most stouts are known for it. Boddington's is another popular name brand out there.
Yeah, that's right.
It's known for nitro. Sam Adams did a whole line of them. I think that's actually what you're drinking.
Right. This is a Sam Adams
nitro series. So did Guinness. Like I said, the last time when we did the episode, right, we had the Guinness. I was shocked that mine didn't have nitro.
And you're right. This is a tad more, you know me, I don't know the details, a tad more flavor than I would like. But
I'll let it a little bit. So it's going to be hot. That's the thing
right.
I thought about it was, since it was kind of creamy and you didn't really get that bite from the carbonation, I thought the hops came across as much more astringent, if that's even a word.
After every drink, again, I don't know if it's nitrogen. After each drink, I'm getting a lot of aftertaste. I don't know if it's the type beer, the hop, or the nitrogen
from the hops. Most likely you're tasting.
It's a very, there's a taste that's hanging around a bit. So, it not terrible. It wouldn't necessarily be something I'd buy on a regular basis. The foam is cool shit. So I kind of, that part of it
is cool. It is probably one of the most rewarding things to watch.
And I like Guinness, so I guess I need to find. So is there a Guinness that you can buy retail that has it or not? Or do we know? All right. Okay, tonight we're going to be talking about dry hopping. Let's get into that. I need someone to first just to explain to me dry hopping versus hopping, or wet hopping. What are my hopping options at this point if I was going to brew starting this weekend? Give me a quick lesson on dry hopping, either one of you.
Well, I guess just to give you the basic differences between the two. So typically what you would do, like while you're making your normal recipe, I mean, if you want to refer to it as wet hopping, we can do that. It's when you put it in the boil, you toss your pellets in the boil, and then that's what allows, the hot water along with the constant movement of the wort itself, like while it's sitting in the boil, allows for the oils to actually get into your wort, and that's how you wind up with a little bit more bitterness. So however long the pellets sit in the heat with the wort moving, that's how you get your bitterness. But once you go to dry hopping, you don't have that heat. It's just sitting in either in the bucket or in your fermenter or wherever it may be, and it's just sitting there at room temperature. But that's where you typically get some of just the aroma out of the hops. So that's where the types of hops that you select for dry hopping are the ones that have those specific aromas.
Not to interrupt you, just so again, I'm the person that doesn't know much. So dry hopping is a technique. Doesn't have anything to do specifically with if this is fresh hop or pellet or anything like that. This is just truly when you actually, match a particular amount of hops to your wort.
Yeah, when you actually put them into your beer.
Okay. Joey, do you have any further explanation on if that, is that your opinion also of what dry hopping would be and how you would use it in brewing?
Yeah, dry hopping is essentially most commonly what people would define it as is after fermentation has completed, you add hops and they're basically just going to provide aroma, maybe a little bit of flavor, and almost no, but I think there's some detectable bitterness from a lot of beer styles. Would be IPAs, huge one. This New England style IPA that's packed full of them. The one thing people need to get a little bit confused with is when you say, a lot of people say, I don't like a real hoppy beer. And I think a lot of times people confuse bitterness in beer with hoppiness. So dry hopping is a way that you can throw a ton of hops in, but you're actually not bittering the beer whatsoever.
Okay. So in a normal brewing process, how many different times are you putting hops in contact with your wort, and or is there a set amount? I mean, can you only dry hop, or do you always have to have some kind of hop in with your boil and then you can dry hop later? I don't even know that.
So basically, beer, you could essentially use no hops and you would still make a malted beverage. I don't think you could by definition call it beer. However, beer is what balances typically the sweetness of the grains and specialty grains that we're using. Dry hopping isn't really balancing anything as far as that goes. It is truly just for aroma. So it depends on the recipe, but most traditional beers don't call for dry hopping. Very seldom do you see recipes. It's more of a newer wave that's become popular in brewing. Back to then, since hops were somewhat scarce, they were using them for all that they could. But you could just dry hop a beer and be extremely sweet, to answer your question.
Okay. So because when you throw it into the wort at boil, like Chris said, more oils are extracted, but because of the temperature, it's also given meaning if you dry hop and I don't know, what's it called when you regularly just put hops? It just
addition? Just a boil addition?
A boil addition. Okay. So if you use the exact same hop to, as an addition, and then also to dry hop, we'll doing both ways, that same exact hop will give you two different flavors based on when you did it.
Mm-hmm. So basically, if you throw a hop in at 60 minutes, you'll get no flavor from the hops. That's where the alpha acids of the hops become very important. The higher the alpha acids, the more bitterness you can get from them. So in essence, you could use, say, Cascade, which is around 7% alpha acids. Volume actually means less than, volume mean less than the alpha acids. So at 60 minutes, you're getting basically just bitterness from the hops. At 30 minutes, you're still getting bitterness, but you're starting to get a slight amount of flavor. So basically, the longer time or the shorter period of time they are in contact with the wort, the more you're getting aroma, and then it turns into flavor and then turns into bitterness. So dry hopping, since you never threw it in at boiling at all, you're only getting aroma from them. That's one of the reasons why we boil the beer, so we can extract the bitterness from the hops.
Okay, so the like in this IPA I'm drinking here, I mean, it's got a pretty. Is it more when it has that stronger odor? Is that because it's probably a dry hopped beer, or is that just the type hop they use?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I mean, when I opened this can, it came right out. So
it'll hit you. Yeah.
The odds are they said, we want this to, now I know we go back and forth because I smell it. Obviously in my mind, I'm tasting it. So,
that's why I like dry hopping beers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, but are you saying, is it 100% aroma and just a tad flavor? Meaning, is it really not getting much of the flavor though from the dry hop?
Well, I mean, I think we learned in grade school, and I know we learned a lot of stuff in grade school that we found debunked to turn out wasn't true. I believe
grade school.
we like 80% of taste comes from smell. Isn't that what they say? So without being a smart ass, I guess that would be the best way I could answer it. But like I said, I could be totally wrong. I've also heard your tongue has like sour, bitter. This has like all these different things, and I found
different
that
sections.
Yeah, they've debunked
activated
that.
After when
they debunked that and said that was a bunch of bullshit. So I don't know. But the hop varieties, when you read a hop variety, citrusy hops are all the crave these days. You know, tropical fruit. You'll see tropical fruit, stone fruit, lychee, if I'm saying that correctly, citrus. You get all
grapefruit.
You get all these notes. Versus more traditional hops had much more of an earthy, piney, yes, to essence to them. Nowadays, we want them as juicy. You hear that term quite a bit in brewing now. You want as juicy hops are the popular ones right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Galaxy. No, I'm sorry. The Citra is the #1 selling hop in the store. So,
but dry hopping is a new thing, you said. So obviously you can make beer without dry hopping. I mean, dry hopping is not a necessity.
So back to dry hopping and IPAs. One of the biggest reasons why we brewed very hoppy beers was that's where the name IPA came from, India Pale Ale. It was we found out that hops are natural preservatives. So they would jam pack them full of hops so that they could make the journey across the sea in the 1800s, I want to believe. Right. So that was one of the reasons why that beer style got the name IPA, because we were doing it more as a preservative reasons, no different than, when you can stuff, typically it's salty. We found out hops were natural preservative because when they would brew the Pilsner style lagers that we were accustomed to, they spoiled by the time they made it to where they were going, and they found out packing it full of hops helped it.
Right, which better. Is always, I mean, again, I think you even always say it, well, it's not hops, so it doesn't have beer, but I always was told that hops was added to beer later to preserve it, and then that's when people also end up enjoying the flavor, but originally hops was not an ingredient of beer.
Which is where I get the question a lot in the store is people say, well, I star sand everything, I cleaned everything, you're telling me you just want me to pour hops straight in my fermenter? What's the deal? Aren't I going to infect my beer? And that's why I always bring up the IPA scenario as hops are natural preservative. I doubt you're going to infect your beer by pouring hops into it. Because I do know people do get a lot of infected beers from putting fruits in there. I mean, that happens a lot because there's wild yeast growing on the fruits. So people are concerned that they're going to infect their beer by dry hopping. And I've done it for years. I've never, knock on wood, had an infected batch of beer. So I think it's plausible, yes. Likely, extremely not likely.
Okay. And back to, I think we already said, though, pellets versus raw. I don't even know what. I know we did a thing the other day on it.
Yeah,
the leaf type. Again, I'd assume there's a difference, but you can obviously dry hop both. So it's just a matter of either what you have or what the recipe calls for. Do you find, though, do you get more aroma dry hopping using one or the other?
Yeah, I haven't done enough with either, but maybe Joe could speak more to it. But that's just my personal preference is pellets, just because I don't want to have to keep tossing in hunks of leaf pellets into my beer. But that's just personal preference.
So as I experimented, I used to just use whole leaf hops as my dry hops. The biggest reason you could put them in a muslin bag or pantyhose looking thing, for lack of better terms, it was easier. Bag. Yeah. So if I use leaf hops, they were in much bigger pieces. So in essence, I wasn't getting nearly as many hops to my final product, little hop particles. Nowadays, I use exclusively pellets because I do what's referred to as cold crashing my beers, which gets all that stuff to fall to the bottom. I don't mess with the muslin bags or the screens or the filters or anything like that anymore. And because of that, it's easier. The whole leaf hops float to the top versus the pellets will sink to the bottom when you get them cold. So it's easier for me to just use the pellets for everything. Whether I'm getting more out of it or not, that's subjective. I mean, I've had certain beers where they're just packed full of aroma, and I've had certain beers where they're not. Sometimes you just roll the dice with it a little bit. It's tough to really keep. It's tough to. There is an exact science to it, but as a home brewer, I'm not sure I've ever personally noticed a difference.
Okay.
And that's the thing is when you are talking adding hops, a lot of times you'll start hearing the term IBUs, and IBUs are referred to as basically the higher the IBUs, the more bitter the beer is. Well, when you use brewing software, when you add dry hop additions, it does not contribute to the IBUs. hence would explain no more bitterness is added to it. So since you're adding bitterness, it's tough to, especially as a home brewer, to measure in any scale, other than the fact that when I open my fermenters up that I dry hop a lot, you can see oils just floating all over the beer, and it's clearly from all the resins that are coming out of the hops.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
That's probably the only way I can measure it.
And just a quick question, but Joey, have you ever heard of IBUs being measured like IBU tinseth? Is that what typically used for like dry hoppy beers? Because you at least you have to account for hops that are added for dry hop additions that aren't directly contributing to the bitterness units. Have you seen that terminology used before?
I've seen that terminology, but I think that I could be wrong when I say this, but I think that it goes back to sometimes you'll hear starting gravity, Plato, terminal velocity. You hear a lot of terms that essentially are different scales that represent the same thing.
Oh, okay.
So I think the tinseth, which you're referring to, I think is just another term for IBUs, but I could be wrong. I could totally be wrong, because sometimes you'll hear it's 5 imperial gallons. Well, I don't know. To me, a gallon is a gallon. What's the difference? You know what I mean? So I don't honestly know the answer to that.
Now, on the pellets, are the pellets just compressed leaves? What makes a pellet?
So we talked about this in the hop growing episode. Right. Basically, when you grow a hop, if my fingers are a hop, in the center where there's what's referred to as a lupulin gland, and that lupulin gland is actually the goods. It's what we're after.
The goods.
So when they pelletize the hop, a lot of times they're trimming the shit that doesn't have the lupulin gland. So pellets usually are slightly more enhanced than the whole leaf hops, just because you've got less mass that's not really contributing in any other way other than taking up space in your brew pot.
Okay.
But it also kind of goes back to the, which weighs more, a 1 pound beer or 1 pound of feathers. Would you think feathers take up, 1 pound of feathers would be huge, and 1 pound,
right? A pound's a pound.
A pound's a pound.
Yeah.
So just because they take up more room in your brew pot doesn't mean at the end of the day you still put an ounce in there. So I don't really know. Versus pelletized don't take up as much surface area, but they're much more dense. So even me saying they trim them could be wrong.
Some kind of a manufacturing process.
They are. Yeah. I would say, other than Sierra Nevada, I can't even think of a brewery. And Sierra Nevada, I think, still is like the only brewery that I know of that exclusively uses whole leaf hops. You go to any brewery around here, pellets is just what everybody uses.
And do these pellets dissolve? Do they break open?
They break apart.
Yeah. Okay, so they do. Now, do you have to, when you dry hop and it's in your fermenter, then do they fall to the bottom and then, or do you have to filter them out some other way? I know you talked about the tea bag with the leaves, but where do the pellets go?
You can typically do that where they'll break apart and they'll somewhat dissolve. But typically what you can do in order to make sure that everything kind of drops out of the solution is you can cold crash it. That's where you just take your bucket and then stick it into like a cold source if you happen to have a deep freezer or something like that. So that's when everything could more or less drops out of suspension and all that stuff is collected down at the bottom. So that's where, for most brewers, if you know that you're going to be dry hopping, most brewers you brew a 5-gallon batch, right? But what most people will do is they'll brew a 5.5-gallon batch because they know that they're going to wind up losing some to dry hopping, because you don't want to wind up collecting all that extra junk that's sitting down there at the bottom. So you'll just upscale how much that you're brewing because you don't want to collect that extra junk that's at the bottom.
Okay, then I'll ask you, Chris, on the time. Are you dry hopping for the whole time of fermentation then, I guess, based on that? Meaning, or do you put it in later once it's already been fermenting for, a couple of days, or is that back to a recipe that decides that?
I would, at least in my personal experience, like I've waited until primary fermentation is completely done until I start dry hopping. And then what I'll do is, in order to, because after primary fermentation is completed, you've got the trub down at the bottom. So you already have junk down at the bottom. So I'll re-rack into a separate bucket so that I know I have just my beer. And after that, I'll toss my dry hops in, or my hops in, to start the dry hopping process for about another week or so.
And that's how you do it, because that's the common way, or you found that gives you the best results?
For me, at least, I found that gives me the best results. But that's, again, just personal preference. I would assume that once primary, you know that, or at least you feel that primary fermentation is complete, you could just toss your hops in on top of that if you really wanted to, as long as you're not moving your bucket to another spot where it might be warmer and start up fermentation again. I would assume that everything would be okay.
Right. Joey, do you agree with that? I mean, whenever you dry hop, are you second fermentation process? Is that when you're doing it?
I'm pretty rogue when it comes to dry hopping. So I do a lot of different practices, and I have experimented with I do different things, and that could be a whole nother story. But I've done what's called as hop bursting, which basically means I start my wort chiller and I cool it down to, say, 160 degrees. And then I stop my wort chiller, add what I would normally dry hop with, add it to there, let it do a hop stand, Whirlpool edition. A lot of breweries call them different things. Let them sit for, 15, 20 minutes. And then I cool the beer the rest of the way down, transfer it to the fermenter, and I essentially dry hop the beer. Not by definition, but I basically did the same thing. The other beer I was drinking a few casts ago, I actually chilled the beer all the way down, poured my hops into my fermenter first, then racked the beer straight on top of that, added my yeast, and basically still got all the aroma from the hops, because once again, it never made contact with boiling wort. Same thing with the hop bursting. You brought it below, I'm going to whack this word to pieces, hop utilization temperatures, to where it's not going to happen. And then finally, I do not transfer to a secondary, simply because, one, if you have a conical fermenter, you can just dump the yeast out of the bottom of your conical, then add your dry hops. But if you're like me and I just dump a whole lot more hops than I normally would have, and yes, I am dry hopping my yeast cake at the bottom too, I understand that, but I add more hops than I normally would if I was transferring to a secondary, and that's because I'm lazy. So I try. It's not because I'm lazy, and more just I don't like moving my beer around a bunch of times, just because back to risk of infection and oxidation. So I don't like moving my beer around. And I don't have a conical yet, even though that's going to be my next piece of brewing equipment. And once I do that, then I would probably back off on my dry hopping on a lot of my recipes to see if that made a difference. Haven't got to experiment with that yet.
Now, when you say boil, so it doesn't have to be fermentation temperature. Obviously, it sounds like Chris is waiting until obviously the beer's cooled down, even been fermented. You're saying as long as it's considered dry hopping as long as it was added after the boil?
So it's basically once your boil is completed, yes. I mean, by definition, it would say after primary fermentation is completed. But new styles of brewing have kind of debunked. Once again, we've debunked kind of that even into that's not that important. As long as because the idea was
you get the result you want.
The idea was if primary fermentation is burping out all that CO2 through your airlock, the thought process was, well, it's burping out all that aroma. So you're losing aroma from those hops because the CO2 is pushing all those good aromas out of the hops. That was the idea and why people didn't do it that way. I think we've realized it's not very true. Now, without making, like I said, this could be a whole nother episode, but let's just talk hop bursting from one extreme, or Whirlpool editions, or whatever you want to call it. And we'll go to the other extreme of the traditional wait for primary fermentation as completed. I find that the only thing you lose is some of the grassy notes from the hops when you hop burst that you get. A lot of brewers don't like those notes in the beers, so I would recommend towards less of that. I will tell you from the last IPA that's actually, now that I blew my keg, that's going to be transferred probably tonight after we get off cast, because I won't have time tomorrow. What I did is I actually, as high crozin started to subside, I added my dry hops in, which was a mistake that I made because since high crozin didn't lower, I threw the hops in there and I looked down there 3 or 4 days later and all my hops were caked all around the sides. So they never really got into the beer because high crozin was still essentially in high crozin. So all that active fermentation just pushed all the hops to the sides of my fermenter. So they're just stuck on the sides of my fermenter and not giving all that aroma to the beer. So I kind of fucked that up.
All right. I guess my question as the can brewer of the group, if I warm up my can, boil a couple gallons of water, pour my my recipe that was in that can into my water, add some ice, cold water, get to temperature, and could I just throw some hops in there then? Would that be dry hopping? I mean, is there an advantage to even dry hopping, an extract beer that was just made from a can? Will it affect the flavor?
By my definition, yes. However, they will be caked all over the side of the pail. So you won't get the most out of them.
Because the temperature, or just because?
Because when beer ferments, it foams up all over the place.
Okay. So then, all right, but I could do like Chris said. Then I could make it with do the can version, and then let it ferment, and then a week later transfer it, throw some hops in there, and actually get a little better flavor than I would have gotten obviously from just the can, which almost never has any hop flavor or aroma. I was
gonna say I would say yes, less flavor and more aroma.
Okay, but that's fine. That's what I'm saying. I would assume you're telling me that a can brewer are you wasting your time dry hopping? Is there any advantage to doing it?
Nope, not at all. I would say go for it.
All right. So it is something that is going to add, even to the most basic recipe, it is going to add some type, again, aroma, flavor to that beer.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
without a doubt.
Does lagering or ailing affect it at all, or it doesn't matter? Obviously, if you're fermenting after, or if you're at it after it ferments, but
so for a long time, the only recommendation I would say is if you're making a lager, is when you do a diacetyl rest is when you should add your dry hops, and that's only because it is much rougher for the oils to get stripped from the hops when they're at that low temperature. So
diacetyl rest is when you bring the temperature back up for a little bit. Is that correct?
Yes. So after a diacetyl rest is basically when you brew a lager. Contrary to most popular belief, most people think that lagers are fermented at actually like in the 30s. That's when they lager. I actually ferment in the 50s, which is still much lower than ales. However, most brewers do what's called a diacetyl rest, and what they do is they take that 50-some degree, usually in the 50 to 55 degree range beer, they then bring it to ale temperatures to get out those last couple points of those last couple gravity points. So it won't make your beer appley or any of those all flavors you associate. What it does is it makes the beer from being too sweet. At that time is when me as a brewer, I'm not speaking from a book standpoint, I'm speaking from an opinion standpoint, that's when I would dry hop the beer. Because when I used to dry hop directly in my keg, and I used to always complain about my beers, I would put more and more and more hops, and I would say, I don't smell them. I'm putting all these hops in my beers. Why aren't I getting aroma? And I went to the home brew meeting, and they was like, what are you doing? I'm like, I dry hop in the keg, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, well, is your beer already cold and you put it in the keg? And I said, yeah. They was like, don't do that. Just throw them in your primary. It's better to throw them in your primary than throw them in your... I was like, well, I'm, my yeast cake and such. And they said, it's better to do it at room temperature on your yeast cake than it is to do it in that. So I truly took a keg out of the refrigerator, brought it to room temperature, let it sit for 3 or 4 days, put it back in there, and believe it or not, it had so much more aroma. It was insane. So I learned that those cool temperatures, it's tougher for those oils to come out of the hops.
Well, because I guess from what I know, I mean, if it's oil based, then obviously the warmer it is, the more likely those oils are going to penetrate.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume. I mean, than cold.
That's another thing I get asked all the time is how long do I dry hop for? And I tell people 3 days, and they go, that's not what my buddy said, or that's not what the books say, and that's not whatever. And I've said, I've read, seen, experienced that after 3 days to 2 weeks to 2 months, you got the most out of them in 3 days. So once again, most books will tell you You should dry hop for a minimum of 7 days, a maximum of 14 days. They've debunked that myth again and again and again. They found that that's not to be true whatsoever. However, if they do sit, if the dry hops do sit on the beer for very, very long periods of time, I've actually got a beer right now that's doing that by accident. You do get those grassy notes out of the hops. They have proven that to be true.
Okay, now, so when you're talking the 3 days, you're saying it 3 days is where you're getting you've maxed out.
Yeah, max utilization.
It doesn't mean that 6 days you're losing anything.
Correct.
You just aren't gaining anything other than time taken up.
Yes,
I would say. So, what is it? A fair analogy would be like, what is it? If you're smoking meat, what is it? The first couple of 2-3 hours,
3 or 4 hours, I think is what they said.
I go by 130 degrees. Once my meat's over 130, I quit smoking or quit adding smoke.
Yeah, because meat will only accept the smoke like when it's the outside's more tender. That's in the first 3-4 hours of smoking meat. Similar analogy.
Mm-hmm. That's funny as you say that, because when I smoke meat now, I'm doing something forever. Instead of tending to a smoker all night long, I'll throw it in there, and after 4 hours, I just throw it in my oven at 250, 225, and say it ain't making a lick of difference than being out there on that grill.
Yeah.
So that's basically what I do these days, and I think I honestly taste a difference, but that's a whole nother conversation. So I think it steams the meat more than it grills the meat or smokes the meat, but we don't need to talk about grilling or we'll be here for hours. But that's a perfect analogy as far as beer brewing goes.
I agree. I mean, it's back to, hey, there's a ton of opinions on barbecue, beer, and poker and fantasy. As long as the outcome is satisfactory to you, it doesn't matter. I mean, do what you want, do what's fun, experiment. I'm guessing the first guy that dry hopped, someone looking to go, what the hell are you doing? I'm sure there was some other brew that went, what do you, what's that going to do?
No, see, he was probably dry hopping so he can hit all of the marks so a BJCP judge could give him a higher score. That's why he was doing it. I'm 100% sure that's why.
The very first hopper.
I know.
Dry hopper.
I do know
100%.
this. I do know this for a fact that there would be a lot of breweries that would be new and upcoming, and they would not hit their numbers. They would get their final beer and go, "Oh shit, we have an IPA. This does not drink like an IPA." And their head brewer would go, "Dry hop the shit out of it. That's what'll fix it." And that's what they did. And quite honestly, I'm not saying we stumbled upon the New England IPA craze, but I honestly feel that's kind of what happened. They brewed an IPA beer and went, what happened? This beer isn't that bitter. So they said, dry hop the shit out of it. And so it was packed full.
I'm guessing originally it wasn't even called dry hopping. It was called...
It was the second edition.
It was called beer fixing. It was called something,
I mean, quite honestly, it was just an aroma edition.
Now, how far back does it go? I know you said they haven't been doing it that long. Do we have any records of when somebody was? I mean, is it thousands of years where people were dry hopping, or is this something that just 50 years ago somebody started doing?
I completely made that shit up. I'm saying it's more popular now. They've probably been doing it forever. I'm just saying it's very popular now.
I got you. Okay.
Right.
It's just like a lot of other things. I mean, we could go on and on and on, but I'm sure there's a lot of things we've been doing for, like, home brewing is really popular right now. But yet, if you talk to anyone, they go, my great grandpa used to make wine at home and it tasted like shit.
In his tub, probably.
He didn't call himself a home brewer. I think he called himself a bootlegger. But, so, I mean... It just depends on terminology has just changed.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, but it is all about, like I said, expectations and what you want and your taste. And, if you're happy with the product.
Yeah. I mean, quite honestly, like I said, I that is the perfect analogy that Chris used because, and I've said that for a long time with home brewing. I mean, if it makes you happy, like I said, especially over the past probably 5 years, I do what works for me because we even had a podcast about this. I'm not brewing beer to win awards. I'm brewing beer that I enjoy. And if there's an easier way
Chris is obviously doing the same thing.
Oh, yeah. So I'm coming for those judges, though. I'm coming for those judges. I'm gonna tell you that right now. Okay.
But I think we actually talked about this. I mean, it's even I use the competitions just like barbecuing. I bet you if I ate competition award-winning honey injected meat to the gills competition winning barbecue, I probably personally wouldn't like it. And so it kind of goes back to I do brew, I do cater to my taste buds, but that's also I think the reason why I've been home brewing for so long is I learned to stop making beers that pleased even friends and just really went to beers that I really enjoyed. I take Essence back to people go, "Oh, what kind of beer is this, Joey?" I'm like, porter-ish, IPA-ish. It's somewhere between a pale ale and IPA. I don't really know because I really don't follow guidelines at all these days. I know what category it technically fits into, but if you pulled out a book and defined it and said it probably misses like 2 or 3 attributes of it. So, I mean, I'm a throw 1056 in it and ferment it and it'll turn out fine. To make a saison, which everyone will go, "You're out of your mind for doing that." So, I mean, that's just kind of like I said. I'm not too hung up on following guidelines. Back to I do what works for me, and I dry hop on top my primary yeast cake because I'm lazy as hell. It works just fine for me. So,
well, again, it's also back to hopping your beer and all this hop flavor, and there's it seems like every week I go to the store, there's a newer beer that's, even more hoppy than the next one. It's almost like the hot sauce thing, somebody has to prove that, this tastes, you can't make something hot enough that I don't like, versus,
and that's the thing. I've said that for a long time, especially hot sauce. I love spicy foods, but I don't want it so spicy that I quit eating it because my mouth is on fire.
Yeah, I don't want indigestion after eating it.
Well, no, I mean, not even that. I just want to get full from my food, not because it's like my mouth is on fire and I can't eat this no more.
Yeah.
Well, and I have a fairly high tolerance to spicy foods, not trying to like beat my chest about that, but there's been times where I eat, hot wings from certain places. Like I'm done. I mean, I've ate 4 and I can't eat no more because my mouth's on freaking fire.
When the heat goes above flavor, in my opinion, where I'm like,
there has to be a balance.
Right.
There needs to be a balance.
Where I know the next bite I'm taking, I'm just going to it's just going to burn my lips. And I agree. I mean,
if I have to sign a waiver before I get my wings, I'm not hops.
But that's the point. I mean, at some point, how hoppy can we make a beer before someone goes, time out. This isn't even, that's still it's beer, but it's nothing but hot.
It's not taste. It's not really. It's not over flavored, but it's not enjoyable.
It's over bitter. It's I don't know. I mean, at some point, there's still a point where you got to go. This isn't what I like anymore.
Right. Well, that was the thing. I like really, really hoppy beers, but I don't want them kind of like the hot wing comparison. I don't want them so damn bitter that I can't taste the malt. So back to the beer that I got judged and got dinged on, they dinged it because they said it was too malty. Well, when I brew an IPA, I like a very well balanced IPA.
What's wrong with all the flavors coming out?
I do, and I like both. I love it. I like clear looking beers. That's why one of the reasons why I don't like any IPAs. I like being able to look at a beer and go, damn, that looks refreshing.
Yes.
Smelling it and go, man.
Right, because back to kindergarten, like you said, smell is a big part of taste, but so is looks.
Correct.
And you know it. How many people that aren't craft beer drinkers, when you show them a dark beer, go, "Oh, I can't drink dark beer. It tastes too much." And then they don't realize most dark beers have less flavor than some light IPAs. I mean, it's not even, but because they visually see it, they don't know why they don't like it. They just know I don't like it because it's darker.
Well, that's the reason why I typically, like I say, I like IPA to pale ales. And for me, the beers I brew are probably closer to IPAs, but I would refer them as, you hear the term session IPA, and that's really just a very hoppy pale ale. And so where do you differentiate the two? And for me, it's alcohol by volume.
Yes.
Pale ales are typically, in the 5% range versus IPAs are usually in the 7% range. So when you start to get there, one kind of goes one way or the other. And like I said, I like a beer that looks great, smells great, tastes great. And to me, I like the good balance of of malt and hops. Nowadays, it's truly just all the flavor, aroma, and everything is being derived from hops, which is great. I don't have a problem with that. As long as you still hit those notes. The problem I have is, why is my beer getting clear? It's got to be this hazy. I'm going to put flour in my beer. To me, I'm one of those like, you want it to look like shit? I don't understand it. But I also understand that when it looks like grapefruit juice, your placebo effect in your mind is going to think it tastes like juice. So I get that. Don't get me wrong. But what was crazy for me was, back to dry hopping, is you get these beers that are, I've seen what is a IPA that's 0 IBUs on the store shelf. That's, in my book, that's not a fucking IPA, because
that's not an IPA.
An IPA is a very bitter beer in my head, but it's called an IPA because it's packed full of hops. But what I like about that is, take my wife, for example, take people who say, I can't drink hoppy beers. You give them a very well-crafted any IPA and they'll go, wow, this is amazing. It almost tastes like mimosa or brass monkey for, with that video, the rich man, poor man, for lack of better terms. And so to me, that's why I like the any IPA craze. Is you take someone like my wife or whoever, who, when she would come home and go, oh man, you're brewing one of those IPA things, you're going to stink up the whole house. To now she's like, oh, you're brewing an any IPA? Oh man, pour me a glass when it's done. And so that's
because that's her flavor. That's her, that's her taste.
Yeah, that's but yet she doesn't like pilsners and things like that are real dry.
And my thing is, I don't have a problem with people's taste. The problem I have is when people's taste turns them into dicks. You have the beer dick, the
wait.
Dick,
I got the perfect term. Someone
the coffee dick.
They're called ale holes.
Ale holes.
I love it.
And I don't know.
I might be one at times.
Well, I think there's times people become dicks of all kinds of things.
Well,
but sometimes you're not a dick. You're just given more information, about something than people were aware of that. But sometimes though you can take that as someone being a dick.
Well, I can honestly say that I used to be a Coors Light drinker before I homebrewed, and I would say, if you give me Bud, I can't stand Bud. I'm a Coors Light drinker. Blah 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 blah. If you gave me Bud, Coors, Miller,
do the Pepsi challenge with that.
I couldn't tell you the difference. I couldn't tell you the difference then. I looked at a can and I use honestly even with homebrewing beer, I use the term placebo effect a lot. Mm-hmm. I looked at that Coors Light can and go, man, this tastes like Coors Light. And I honestly, if you took that can away, if you took that can art away from me, Chris, I couldn't tell the difference.
Well, again, I know, and you even said it before you were into brewing. I've been drinking Heineken like 15 years. They have proven that green bottle. People will still say, but
no, skunk.
Heineken in a can tastes just the same as Heineken in the green bottle. And people will still, if you pour them a Heineken in the can, but you pour it behind something and then set the green bottle out in front, they'll go, oh, that's skunky from that green bottle. No, it just tastes different. It just has a different taste. And I even know enough to now, Heineken now has less of a taste to me because I drink more beers that have more flavor. But a Heineken compared to a Bud Light has a different flavor.
Now, I will say this. If you put, like we said, all the BMCs in front of me in unlabeled glasses, I will fail that test miserably. And
10 out of 10 times I fail it.
Okay, but the one test I do want to prove, and this is the green bottle test, is I can tell you the difference between Yingling and a can and a bottle.
Oh, you've been saying that for years.
I promise you I can do it. We need to do it. And you get a bottle and a can, pour them in 6 glasses.
But my argument with people that say that is
mark my word.
The odds are
that's rolling.
Yeah, but you're tasting can. That to me,
no. I'm telling you that Yingling in the bottle is funky.
You're trying to say that the green bottle makes it taste different. I'm telling you the can makes it taste different.
No. The green bottle makes
liner shit.
No, the green bottle makes it skunky, and
it doesn't.
It's much more malty.
It doesn't.
You go get it too, and I will do it. Blind taste test.
I think that's all subjective. It's all subjective.
Right. Even what you're telling me, if you can say that's from the bottle, that doesn't mean that it's skunky because it's in the bottle.
Okay, then
you knew the can tasted different because aluminum, even with that seal, does offer something. I'm sorry, you can't put something in aluminum because I've drank it.
But I can't tell anything else.
The question of the week.
Hold on, wait. But I can't tell anything else.
Question of the week, HBYOB.
One more tier.
Green bottles. Should I give a shit?
So I got one more tier. One more tier.
Oh my god!
To completely debunk this, and I will do it in a keg as well. I will do it from tap, bottle, and keg. I can do it. The same beer in 3 different serving vessels, and I will do it. And that will even debunk the fact that green bottle.
No, it doesn't. That doesn't. It just means that you know that each one tastes different.
It's a fact. Light skunks.
It's not.
It's a fact. Light does skunk beer.
That's why the homebrew bottles are brown.
If Heineken is stored properly, you cannot taste the difference. I will never disagree with that. If not stored properly and it's beat up by the sunlight, it is going to skunk it. That is a fact. So
who else does it? Rolling Rock? They got the green bottles too.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
Yeah, the problem is Miller Lite, but the clear bottle even would be skunkier then based on that. Meaning a clear bottle's even allowing more sun to get to it or UV light or whatever you think is making it skunky.
The last
problem is it isn't
from a can and it was skunky as shit. So I'm just telling you I can do it with Yingling. That's all I was getting to. I can do it with Yingling, and I can't do it with any other light beer on the market.
But I accept that you would know the difference between what came from a bottle and what came from a can. I'm not arguing that. But that argument doesn't say that doesn't prove that it's bad because it's in the bottle. It's just different.
I didn't say it would be bad.
Skunky because of the light. You're not doing any experiment there that's telling me it's skunky because of the light.
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it's more prone to getting bad. That's all I'm saying.
Well, sure, but that's any beer. Even beer in a brown bottle, if you set it out in the sunlight in your kitchen, is going to taste weird, 3 weeks later if it's set in I mean, that but
well,
again,
I know
someone is in a box that no light gets to.
I know someone
in my refrigerator.
I know someone who gave me a case of beer that we went camping or something, and the cooler, all the ice got melted and the beer got warm, and we put it back in the refrigerator. He said, "Here, take this." And I said, "Why?" He goes, "I don't drink that beer no more. It got warm." I said, "What?"
That's even been proven. That's been proven that's not true. Beer changing temperature does not make it skunky.
Placebo. Yeah, I'll cook with it though. I mean, if it's like a lager or something like that, or like if I find like old Yingling sitting around, I'll cook with it.
Yeah, but what's there to cook? Why not drink it? It's fine.
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying I would just rather.
I cook
with beer. I cook with beer all the time. I just rarely put it in the food.
No.
Oh yeah.
No. But
give me some brats, some beer brats or something like that.
Chris, I made beer brats this weekend.
Oh, they're the best.
I will be the first to tell you when I've made beer brats for a long time, but obviously I used to make it with the shitty beer I bought, MGD. And it didn't really affect it much. And now when I make beer brats, I will go in my refrigerator and find an IPA or something that's got much more flavor. And you cut up an onion, you dump that beer in there, you throw your brats in, and
absolutely
30 minutes to an hour later, or I have sometimes let it go in the crock pot for hours.
Yeah.
There's not a better brat.
I made beer brats 2 weeks ago, and I drank like 3 or 4 beers and grilled the brats on the grill. And
when I go to Kroger's and buy a pack I always buy a 6-pack or 12-pack of beer when I'm buying beer brats, because to me, it's what you cook them in. You can't. I don't know what a real.
I will give you that. If you just use a light lager, you might as well just boil them in water. In my opinion, you just don't taste it.
No, I still grill mine first before I add it to the. I grill them up,
mine and then grill them.
Then I add them to the onion beer mixture, and hey. So I'm dry hopping my brats. Can I dry hop my brats?
I mean, I guess.
So.
I guess it's like dry cleaning. how can you get something clean if you don't get it wet? Because when you dry hop a beer, they're getting in the beer, so they're getting wet. So you're not technically dry hopping anything. I want to know if I don't dry clean any. I don't own any clothes nice enough to dry clean. But if I did, someone in the back is getting that thing wet. I'm sorry.
No, but I knew a person though that would say that dry cleaning, when they even went to an hour, meaning you could get something dry clean an hour, and the guy said, "Does it really take that long to put a plastic bag over my shirt?"
The closest I've come to dry cleaning is spraying with Febreze. That's been about it.
You know
That's
what?
how you do it, right?
Or put it in the dryer with a dryer sheet. That's dry cleaning.
Yes, that is
dryer sheet. I have dry cleaned many times. I used to sell real estate. I dry cleaned all the time.
There you go.
Got the wrinkles out and threw a dryer sheet in there.
All right, I believe you. All right, question of the week, and we won't make it about green bottles. The question of the week is: approximately how long will a 5-pound CO2 tank last if I'm using a corny cake?
That's actually a tough question. A 5-pounder? Yeah.
Trust me, it also depends on how your hoses are, because I've burned up a 5-gallon or a 5-pound tank in a night.
That is actually what I tell every customer. I say less than 24 hours if you have a CO2 leak.
Mm-hmm.
However, if you have no CO2 leak, I have had I use a 20-pounder, and to answer this question, you have to what's the term I'm looking for? Hydrotest a CO2 tank every 5 years. And I, like clockwork, fill my CO2 tank up, and it needs hydrotested. And then that 20-pounder lasts me 5 years, because when I go to fill it up a second time, it needs hydrotested again. So if you smash that down, and I would say I probably homebrew more than your average person. So I would say a 5-pounder will last you. It has less to do with time elapsed and more to do with beer wise. I would say it would probably last you 15, 30, at minimum 30 gallons of beer, 30 to 40 gallons of beer.
Chris, how many pounds do you use?
I would say I actually do have a little 5-pounder that we've used for competitions in the past. And I would think just off of that one day that we took that little 5-pounder down to the Beer and Sweat last year, I would say that we might have used 3/4 of a pound just in that one day. But that was just because we were making multiple pulls off of it. Throughout the day. So I think it's a combination of how much you brew, how often you drink. All those factors kind of go into it. But I would say a 5-pounder. Months.
Yeah.
Months. All right.
Well, that's the thing. Most people come to me and say, well, how long will this last me? Like, well, once a year, once to 6 months. And I say, time-wise is irrelevant. If you're pouring beer all day long, you're going to go through it in probably a couple of days.
Right.
But for your average, couple, 2, 3, 4 beers a night, drinker, it's going to last you a while. The biggest thing I actually had something I thought of, but it left me. So, your gauge, your need gas gauge is very inaccurate, especially if you're putting in the refrigerator, because it's registering. It's almost useless. It's registering PSI, not the amount of pounds that's in the tank. So there's only one way your PSI goes down. It's when you're almost out of gas. So I always tell you that gauge is really useless. On your CO2 tank, there is it'll say TW. That stands for your tare weight. And most, like a 5-pounder, typically says 7.73 pounds. So all you have to do is put your tank on a scale with nothing else connected to it, subtract whatever that TW weight is from it, and you know how much gas you got left.
Now, will that 5-pounder last longer or not as long if I'm using it to fill green bottles?
It will last much longer, because green beer tastes like shit.
There you go. So you shouldn't be using it all that often.
Whatever. Heineken's been around forever. If it's that bad, why is it? It is one of the top-selling beers in the world. It's not horrible.
Well,
they store it properly.
Just because it's been around forever doesn't mean it makes it good. Like I said, we started this earlier. We've been told for 18 zillion years that we have 10 planets, and
it makes my burritos and pizza taste delicious.
Well, that sounds good right now.
All right, next week, brewing with a bag. So me and Mrs. Easy will be brewing together. Oh no, brewing in a bag. I'm sorry.
There
brewing
you go.
In a bag, not with a bag. I'm sorry. So next week we'll be talking about that. That's getting closer to my style of brewing. I like that. So brewing in a bag will be next week. Chris, how was your home brew you had tonight?
I thought it was pretty good. I mean, for it being a little while since I've tried it, thought it was really good.
Then you'd make it again?
Yeah. Actually, I do need to brew here within the next few weeks or so.
Did you dry hop that?
I did actually, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Chris, where can we find you? Anything else you needed to add before you go tonight?
No, you can come find me on Twitter, normally arguing about fantasy football, but come talk to me on Twitter at Chris Allen, FFWX.
All right. And I'll be looking for you. I mean, I know a lot of athletes, they have these, big chains with like numbers on them, like 23 and 21 and all that. I didn't realize that was the rating they got for their beer that they added to contest. I just thought that was jersey numbers.
I'll have to get one of those then.
Now I know if you get one of those chains, it's your.
So I won't feel bad for.
The judge will already know what to judge you for.
Yeah,
I'll get a 3.1.
There you go. Joey, where can people find you? And how is your home brew that you drank tonight?
The home brew is good. I would say still, I think I'm not going to be trying too many more Warped Wing beers in my future. You can reach me at HBYOB.
You're such a non-sellout. You just believe because they sold out that they can't make a good beer.
There's nothing wrong with selling out whatsoever.
It's like the green bottle shit. You have it in your mind that they're now too big to be a good craft beer maker.
Anyway.
Yes. So yes.
No.
Be honest with your listeners.
All my beer comes in a clear bottle because I keg it, so it's all in a glass.
There you go.
But you can reach me at hbyob.com. You can email me at joey@hbyob.com, and all the social media links are in the YouTube description.
Send him some questions.
Yes,
questions
please.
of the week. I think in a couple weeks we talked. We'll be having another Q&A type episode where we just have a bunch of different questions. So make sure if you go to the store, drop in a question or email or tweet us a question or two, and we'll add it to the list. So I'm just on Twitter at A Fantasy Fan. If you want to drop me a note, as you've learned, I don't know anything. I will tell you my opinion of green bottle beer because James Bond even drank Heineken. So everybody, we'll see you next week. Say goodnight.